Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the library. It is I'm very sleepy today. Alana and I both went out and got our vaccinations for the flu and COVID yesterday, and so the arm is smarting a little bit. We've been a little sleepy today, so that's the new adventure in this day and age. Much better than it used to be with all the other consequences of COVID before we had vaccines. But it is what it is. Work is going well. No more explosions. The explosions are few and far between, although I do occasionally patch the wrong switch, which is, great fun. A whole boatload of fun. I'll do that all over again. But that's doable. That's doable. It is the 29th today. It's like tomorrow's Halloween, isn't it? I don't know these things. Well, either tomorrow or the 30th. When is Halloween? Is it the 30th or the 31st? Why don't I know these things? It's the 31st. It's Friday. Cool. I work on that day. I have tomorrow off, though. I'm taking the car in to get the tires changed, and I'm coming home, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no actual plan for my day off. It's on a Thursday, too, which is very strange. Normally Friday. You organize your days off or have, a longer weekend or something, right? It's, or if there's an emergency, I suppose. I don't like using leave days for that. That's what sick days are for, obviously, but, different circumstances exist at various places around the world. But, so I have this odd day off tomorrow. I'll probably play Space Marine a lot. Probably. Or look after the cats. That's a thing that has to happen, too. Gwen decided to jump up on we have these little shelves anchored to the wall, and one of them is this sort of like 4-tier shelf, kind of, if you will, the big scratching post that holds them all up in the middle. And we thought, oh, she's getting better. She's better balanced. She still has the onesie on. That still inhibits her movement, but it seems like she's been getting more accustomed to it. And then she just teetered over and fell off. I think she was on the lowest rung. We have had some stressors today. In addition to that, so it's been an angsty day, I guess. An angsty day. We finished a book. So that's right. We read Sleepy Hollow. I was under some idea that Sleepy Hollow was going to be 2 streams or more. I didn't realize how short it was. So that's fine. We have a huge list of books we can read. That'll do. Oh, my glasses are doing the eyebrow thing. For that, I need new glasses again. These ones are not working out. I just lowered there we go. I lower the glasses ever so, and this just worse. It's awesome. Wonderful. I am not moving my eyebrows, I promise. I am moving my head. Anyways, where was I? Yes, Sleepy Hollow. So we read that. It was okay. It was short. It was a little funny the way it concluded. Are they better? Like, I don't know. It's like I'm doing this, and that's like crossing the position of the camera with my eyebrows, and they go flippy flip. And then where was it? Look at them. Bob, 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 bob. Bob, 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 bob. And what the hell is that? They're there. See that? They're in my eyes. Why are my eyebrows in my eyes? Explain that. That's my eyebrows moving for real right there. I can't do one at a time with this model. I have to complain to Shikamoto. Hey, give me independent eyebrow moving. That seems like a different issue. Different issue? No, it's the same issue. Anyways. Yeah, so entertaining conclusion, I think. which is makes it kind of not as supernaturally as you might think it is, but there it is. Or hey, make it so my eyebrows can't go in my eyes. That's, I mean, I can probably do that. I can do that in BTS. I can probably limit how low they go. I might want to limit them to prevent them from going under the eyeglasses. Perhaps that'll be a thing. Then like I could do like that's high, and then like there we go. Make them go no lower than like here. This is masterful control of facial muscles and balancing against, glasses. Like this isn't so bad. It's like down here where they overlap. Anyways, important things that we have to contend with and figure out. But yeah, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should make a note. I keep making notes in this to-do list. I think I've stopped looking at it. I have to reevaluate it. There are some things in here I do want to do. I was going to double check the animal fact one. That never happened. But you sorted it, did you? Yeah, Seribot did nothing again. Yeah. Oh, what was I literally just going to do? Set bound for eyebrow wiggle to avoid going in eyes. There we go. Good old English. The old eyebrow English. Yeah, but tonight, because we have concluded the Sleepy Hollows, the legend of the Sleepy Hollow, or of Sleepy Hollow, we're going to start The War of the Worlds, which is a significantly larger book, or two books technically. It has book one and it has book two, as I learned the day before yesterday, I guess. I have never read this book. I remember when I was younger, there was a TV series or something, and that went on. I don't think it followed the books because I'm pretty sure it was like at least a couple seasons, right? There's been a lot of remakes of this stuff too, right? So that's all I really know is I remember some guy in a wheelchair that took voice commands, which was a radical idea back in that day. And he had this like quarterstaff, which was like a pole, and he was sneaky. He had like a metal rod that went up the middle of it, so it was really sturdy. And then he would give voice commands to his wheelchair, and it would spin him around, and he would smack people with it when they were fighting. So he was he was a surprise close quarters combat combatant. Yes, that's all I remember. Vague memories of people running in rooms and stuff, garages perhaps, a parking lot. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So fundamentally, the book will be new to me, except for perhaps like what kind of happened with what was the book? Dracula and the memories of D&D and other sort of fiction that has derived from novels like Dracula. I'm pretty sure War of the Worlds has inspired a lot of science fiction stories. If not itself being inspired by some earlier work, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's fairly new in the genre of aliens coming to the planet. So it'll be interesting to see if any of the events from this reading trigger memories of other series, right? That'll be interesting. We do have to get a few things set up. This time I did the book, but why don't we pop over to our reading stream? There you go. That's what happened. That's the real sound effect. You see here, we still have last stream's decorations up, so we're going to dig back into here. Let's see the reading book. Unlock that, and we're going to find where's my book. Go back to my shelves, pick out my library. Oh goodness, look at what I did there. Okay, I'm not playing Space Marine, so we're going to open camp. And we're going to fix this. I don't know why there was a white background on there. Yeah, that's kind of unexpected. That shouldn't be there. Right, that's not a thing. Apply alpha and linear space. No, okay, that's not going to work there. No, it's just part of the image. Open this, open that. Okay, open an existing image. Blank book. Let's go visit this file. Not Sleepy Hollow. The World. I'm going to have to start clearing some of this stuff. The War of the Worlds book template. Here we go. Well, that's interesting because that does have an alpha. That's There it is. Okay, let's just do another export, I guess. I suppose. Wonder for no, the PNG should be fine, right? Oh, hang on. Hang on. Yeah, no, that's asset. That should be right. Let's okay. I do this. I do this. Don't want to save that as a template. I want to save it as the asset. The book asset. What are the worlds? Do you go and do that? Oh, hang on. No. Export as. Bloop. Go down to JPEG. Just did I get the title? I might not have gotten the title right. So yeah, I wouldn't have gotten the title right. JPEG, and then go down to where it says the War of the Worlds book asset. Export. Place. Export. That's going to do that thing. And here it goes. Now it's black. Okay, what we're going to do. Edit. Never had so. I can hear you laughing upstairs, Valana. Shame on you. Okay, we're just going to change it and then bring it back. It's still black. Oh my goodness. What is it doing that for? All of a sudden, the laws of physics and stuff are wrong. If we do that. Hang on, I don't need to add mask. We just undo this. I think I know what it is. The base layer is a PNG. Check. Edit layers. Network. Export as. Save, replace. Okay, we're just gonna swap it in, swap it out. No. No. Why are you doing this all of a sudden? Collapse that like that. What are the other ones like? Let me compare this to other graphics. This is quite frustrating. Do this. That's a PNG, so maybe we try making it a PNG. Supposed to a JPEG, all that. Pretty sure JPEGs have proper transparencies in them. No, let's give it a shot. Maybe I am wrong. I am not a cool graphics person. Smart. So notice that the Sleepy Hollow thing is still on it. It's just... Okay, maybe JPEG is the wrong format then. So we got that working. That's awesome. We're going to go to the book poster next. This is the other thing. And book poster. And this is, of course, the one that I was looking at before. You know, like, I'm gonna zoom in. You won't be able to see it, of course, because, you know, I have this bad habit of not showing anyone anything. Here we go. Come back here. Zoom, zoom. Actually, why not? Just here you go. Here you go. It's there. That's the cover. I believe that is the original book's cover. If not, it's pretty close. You can see the shadow along the right-hand edge and the bottom edge. That's one of the plugins I have. What a great usage of such amazing graphics, yeah? Yeah. That's what I thought. Tuck that in over there. Cool. Now that we've done the pre-stream setup, we can go live, right? So we have to go live soon, I think. So, and the thumbnail worked, by the way. I got to put that on Blue Sky, and you know, 2/3 of the VTuber Reddits that I want to do, and I'm still waiting to hear back from moderators from one of the subreddits. Maybe I'll have to join their Discord and say, hey, what's the deal? What's the catch? What am I doing wrong? Okay. Book is here, and the thingy is there. No, I don't want to update anything, especially while streaming. Holy cow. Good Lord. It's like tempting fate more so than I've ever done in any other game that I've ever played. Okay, it's spray time. All right. All right, shall we get started? I don't think I have anything else to do. You know what? I am going to do one more thing. My bad. I want to show off something that a friend of ours is doing. Let's see. Or should I just do this? I know what I'll do. I want to do this in other scenes too, possibly. So I will go over here. Yeah, let's do like the ad overlay. Just rolling back. Sure, okay. Let's go and add just an image. Can I just put, yeah, just an image. Friend of ours, Melanie Bell, is doing what's it called? A game jam. So I see how that's working. Yeah, it should be good. She's doing a solo game jam starting. It starts on Monday, I think, doesn't it, Valena? And she is going to run, I think she said, called it 40 hours of live development, a special event. Yeah. And this is really cool. This is something that I think she's really looking forward to, and she would like to see a lot of people enjoy it as well. Yeah, next Monday. She's going to run it for a couple of weeks, and then at the end of it, she's going to release the final product on itch.io. No AI assets, so we wholly support this. And yeah, it's going to be a good time for her. It's also going to be probably stressful. So she is available on, oh, she doesn't have a link on here. What is her? She is, if I go like, no, Twitch is not helping me out. Let me just go find a link to her channel. I'll bring this up at the end of the stream too, I think. That should work out well. She is in the UK. Or in thereabouts, themabouts area, Western Europe. Good old Twitch is kind of like, nah, I don't need to put anything sort of. Actually, she's one of my recommended channels, to be honest. Not that there is. Yeah, thank you, Valana. Yeah, twitch.tv/MelanieBellCH. And you can go check her out there. Cool. I wanted to bring that up. Anyone who watches this, if you watch this before Monday, go check her out. Smart girl. Now that that's done, and this is here, I think we can actually finally get onto the book. All right. Let's see. Chapter marker. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. There's a quote here, I think. Yeah, she's also a writer and wrote an original story on stream. She does a lot of sort of on-stream development, yeah, of various things. What is it like? The art with the pixel art. She does pixel art. She does game design. Well, she has done game design. She plays games. Yeah, she's been on there for a while too. There's a quote here. But who shall dwell in these worlds if they be inhabited? Are we or they lords of the world? And how are all things made for man? Kepler, quoted in the Anatomy of Melancholy. I won't read the table of contents, but be assured, this is book 1, chapter 1. Sorry, book 1, The Coming of the Martians. Chapter 1, The Eve of the War. I guess they named their chapters. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that this world was being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. That as men busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied. Perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their empire over matter. It is possible that the infusoria under the microscope do the same. Infusoria, I like that word. No one gave a thought to the older worlds of space as sources of human danger, or thought of them only to dismiss the idea of life upon them as impossible or improbable. It is curious to recall some of the mental habits of those departed days. At most, terrestrial man fancied there might be other men upon Mars, perhaps inferior to themselves and ready to welcome a missionary enterprise. Yet across the gulf of space, minds that are to our minds as ours are to those of the beasts that perish, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. And early in the 20th century came the great disillusionment. The planet Mars, I scarcely need remind the reader, revolves about the sun at a mean distance of 140 million miles, and the light and heat it receives from the sun is barely half of that received by this world. It must be, if the nebular hypothesis has any truth, older than our world, and long before this earth ceased to be molten, life upon its surface must have begun its course. The fact that it is scarcely 1/7 of the volume of Earth must have accelerated its cooling to the temperature at which life could begin. It has air and water and all that is necessary for the support of animated existence. Yet so vain is man, and so blinded by his vanity, that no writer, up to the very end of the 19th century, expressed any idea that intelligent life might have developed there far, or indeed at all, beyond its earthly level. Nor was it generally understood that since Mars is older than our Earth, with scarcely a quarter of the superficial area and remoter from the Sun, it necessarily follows that it is not only more distant from time's beginning, but nearer its end. The secular cooling that must someday overtake our planet has already gone far indeed with our neighbor. Its physical condition is still largely a mystery, but we know now that even in its equatorial region, the midday temperature barely approaches that of our coldest winter. Its air is much more attenuated than ours. Its oceans have shrunk until they cover but 1/3 of its surface, and as its slow seasons change, huge snow caps gather and melt about either pole and periodically inundate its temperate zones. That's not the Mars I'm familiar with. That last stage of exhaustion, which to us is still incredibly remote, has become a present-day problem for the inhabitants of Mars. The immediate pressure of a present-day problem for the inhabitants of Mars. I just read the same line again, my bad. The immediate pressure of necessity has brightened their intellects, enlarged their powers, and hardened their hearts. And looking across space with instruments and intelligences such as we have scarcely dreamed of, they see, at its nearest distance, only 35 million miles sunward of them, a morning star of hope, our own warmer planet, green with vegetation and gray with water, with a cloudy atmosphere eloquent of fertility, with glimpses through its drifting cloud wisps of broad stretches of populous country and narrow, navy-crowded seas. And we men, the creatures who inhabit this earth, must be to them at least as alien and lowly as are the monkeys and lemurs to us. The intellectual side of man already admits that life is an incessant struggle for existence, and it would seem that this too is the belief of the minds upon Mars. Their world is far gone in its cooling, and this world is still crowded with life, but crowded only with what they regard as inferior animals. To carry warfare sunward is, indeed, their only escape from the destruction that, generation after generation, creeps upon them. And before we judge of them too harshly, we must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species has wrought, not only upon animals, such as the vanished bison and the dodo, but upon its inferior races. The Tasmanians, in spite of their human likeness, were entirely swept out of existence in a war of extermination waged by European immigrants in the space of 50 years. Are we such apostles of mercy as to complain if the Martians warred in the same spirit? The Martians seem to have calculated their descent with amazing subtlety. Their mathematical learning is evidently far in excess of ours, and to have carried out their preparations with a well-nigh perfect unanimity. They did it at the same time. Had our instruments permitted it, we might have seen the gathering trouble far back in the 19th century. Hello. Okay, I can see the system like over there now. That's interesting. Fascinating. So Stream Deck is muting my mic, but it won't unmute it. I'm gonna relaunch the software. Okay, that's thank you. I will. That's not too far back. I'll get back to that soon. Yay! This is pure. This is true scuff. This is true scuff. There's why we're here. Really weird, because I unmuted it in OBS. Then I hit the button again. And I was like, yeah, no, it muted you, but it won't unmute me. Okay. Yeah. All right. I fixed it. Awesome. Let's back up a little bit. Said unanimity. Okay. Let's see. Let's capture that. All right. Let's just start with this paragraph. Right. I'm good now, right? Oh, actually, I can't see. It's fine. Okay. Yes, I'm good. Thank you. The Martians seem to have calculated their descent with amazing subtlety. Their mathematical learning is evidently far in excess of ours, and to have carried out their preparations with a well-nigh perfect unanimity. Unanimity. I want to say uni, but it's unanimity. They did it unanimously. Just okay, that's the word I'm going to use. Had our instruments permitted it, we might have seen the gathering trouble far back in the 19th century. Men like Schiaparelli watched the red planet. It is odd, by the by, that for countless centuries Mars has been the star of war, but failed to interpret the fluctuating appearances of the markings they mapped so well. All that time the Martians must have been getting ready. During the opposition of 1894, a great light was seen on the illuminated part of the disk. First at the Lick Observatory, then by Perrotin of Nice, and then by other observers. English readers heard of it first in the issue of Nature, dated August 2. I am inclined to think that this blaze may have been the casting of the huge gun in the vast pit sunk into their planet, from which their shots were fired at us. Peculiar markings, as yet unexplained, were seen near the site of that outbreak during the next two oppositions. The storm burst upon us 6 years ago now. As Mars approached opposition, Laval of Java set the wires of the astronomical exchange palpitating with the amazing intelligence of a huge outbreak of incandescent gas upon the planet. It had occurred towards midnight of the 12th, and the spectroscope to which he had once resorted indicated a mass of flaming gas, chiefly hydrogen, moving with an enormous velocity towards this Earth. This jet of fire had become invisible about 12:15. He compared it to a colossal puff of flame suddenly and violently squirted out of the planet, as flaming gases rushed out of a gun. A singularity appropriated phrase it proved. A singularly appropriate phrase it proved. God, I got none of the R's right in that one. Yet the next day, there was nothing of this in the papers except a little note in the Daily Telegraph, and the world went in ignorance of one of the gravest dangers that ever threatened the human race. I might not have heard of the eruption at all had I not met, oh dear, Ogilvy, the well-known astronomer, except to me, at Ottershaw. He was immensely excited at the news, and in the excess of his feelings invited me up to take a turn with him that night in a scrutiny of the red planet. Ogilvy? Okay, Ogilvy. That's not an A, but I'll take your word for it. Ogilvy. In spite of all that has happened since, I still remember that vigil very distinctly. the black and silent observatory, the shadowed lantern throwing a feeble glow upon the floor in the corner, a steady ticking of the clockwork of the telescope, the little slit in the roof, an oblong profundity with the stardust streaked across it. Ogilvy moved about, invisible but audible. Looking through the telescope, one saw a circle of deep blue and the little round planet swimming in the field. It seemed such a little thing, so bright and small and still, faintly marked with transverse stripes and slightly flattened from the perfect round. But so little of it, so silvery warm, a pin's head of light. It was as if it quivered, but really this was the telescope vibrating with the activity of the clockwork that kept the planet in view. As I watched, the planet seemed to grow larger and smaller and to advance and recede, but that was simply that my eye was tired. 40 millions of miles it was from us, more than 40 millions of miles of void. Few people realize the immensity of vacancy in which the dust of the material universe swims. Near it in the field, I remember, were 3 faint points of light, 3 telescopic stars infinitely remote, and all around it was the unfathomable darkness of empty space. You know how that blackness looks on a frosty starlit night. In a telescope, it seems far profounder and invisible to me because it was so remote and small, flying swiftly and steadily towards me across that incredible distance, drawing nearer every minute by so many thousands of miles came the thing that they were sending us. The thing that was to bring so much struggle and calamity and death to the earth. I never dreamed of it then as I watched. No one on earth dreamed of that unerring missile. That night, too, there was another jutting out of gas from the distant planet. I saw it, a reddish flash at the edge, the slightest projection of the outline just as the chronometer struck midnight. And at that I told Ogilvy, and he took my place. The night was warm and I was thirsty, and I went stretching my legs clumsily and feeling my way in the darkness to the little table where the siphon stood. While Ogilvy exclaimed at the streamer of gas that came out towards us. That night, another invisible missile started on its way to the Earth from Mars, just a second or so under 24 hours after the first one. I remember how I sat on the table there in the blackness, with patches of green and crimson swimming before my eyes. I wished I had a light to smoke by, little suspecting the meaning of the minute gleam I had seen and all that it would presently bring me. Ogilvy watched till one, then gave it up, and we lit the lantern and walked over to his house. Down below in the darkness were Uttershaw and Chertsey and all their hundreds of people sleeping in peace. Oh, looking down at the town. He was full of speculation that night about the condition of Mars, and scoffed at the vulgar idea of its having inhabitants who were signaling us. His idea was that meteorites might be falling in a heavy shower upon the planet, reasonable, or that a huge volcanic explosion was in progress. He pointed out to me how unlikely it was that organic evolution had taken the same direction in the 2 adjacent planets. The chances against anything man-like on Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, he said. Hundreds of observers saw the flame that night, and the night after about midnight, and again the night after, and so for 10 nights, a flame each night. Why the shots ceased after the 10th, no one on Earth has attempted to explain. It may be the gases of the firing caused the Martians inconvenience, dense clouds or smoke or dust, visible through a powerful telescope on Earth as little gray fluctuating patches, spread throughout the clearness of the planet's atmosphere and obscured its more familiar features. Even the daily papers woke up to the disturbances at last, and popular notes appeared here, there, and everywhere concerning the volcanoes upon Mars. The serio-comic periodical Punch, I remember, made a happy use of it in the political cartoon. And all unsuspected, those missiles the Martians had fired at us drew earthward, rushing now at a pace of many miles a second through the empty gulf of space, hour by hour and day by day, nearer and nearer. It seems to me now almost incredibly wonderful that, with that swift fate hanging over us, men could go about their petty concerns as they did. I remember how jubilant Markham was at securing a new photograph of the planet for the illustrated paper he edited in those days. People in these latter times scarcely realize the abundance and enterprise of our 19th century papers. For my own part, I was much occupied in learning to ride the bicycle, and busy upon a series of papers discussing the probable developments of moral ideas as civilization progressed. That's an interesting conversation, I'm sure. One night, the first missile then could scarcely have been 10 million miles away. I went for a walk with my wife. It was starlight, and I explained the signs of the zodiac to her, and pointed out Mars, a bright dot of light creeping zenithward, towards which so many telescopes were pointed. It was a warm night. Coming home, a party of excursionists from Chertsey or Owlsworth passed us singing and playing music. There were lights in the upper windows of the houses as the people went to bed. From the railway station in the distance came the sound of shunting trains, ringing and rumbling, softened almost into melody by the distance. My wife pointed out to me the brightness of the red, green, and yellow signal lights hanging in a framework against the sky. It seemed so safe and tranquil. Chapter 2: The Falling Star. Then came the night of the first falling star. It was seen early in the morning, rushing over Winchester eastward, a line of flame high in the atmosphere. Hundreds must have seen it, and taken it for an ordinary falling star. Albin described it as leaving a greenish streak behind it that glowed for some seconds. Denning, our greatest authority on meteorites, stated that the height of its first appearance was about 90 or 100 miles. It seemed to him that it fell to Earth about 100 miles east of him. I was at home at that hour, and writing in my study, and although my French windows faced towards Ottershaw, and the blind was up, for I loved those days to look up at the sky, I saw nothing of it. Yet this strangest of all things that ever came to Earth from outer space must have fallen while I was sitting there, visible to me had I only looked up as it passed. Some of those who saw its flight say it traveled with a hissing sound. I myself heard nothing of that. Many people in Berkshire, Surrey, and Middlesex must have seen the fall of it, and at most have thought that another meteorite had descended. No one seems to have troubled to look for the fallen mass. No one seems to have troubled to look for the fallen mass that night. But very early in the morning, poor Ogilvy. I keep having to look at chat where Valana has the phonetic pronunciation. Ogilvy, who had seen the shooting star, and who was persuaded that a meteorite lay somewhere on the common between Horsell, Ottershaw, and Woking, rose early with the idea of finding it. Find it he did. Soon, don't worry. I will worry about it. I am reading words. What more is there to worry about? Find it he did, soon after dawn, and not far from the sand pits. An enormous hole had been made by the impact of the projectile, and the sand and gravel had been flung violently in every direction over the heath, forming heaps visible a mile and a half away. The heather was on fire eastward, and a thin blue smoke rose against the dawn. The thing itself lay almost entirely buried in the sand. Amidst the scattered splinters of a fir tree, it had shivered to fragments in its descent. The uncovered part had the appearance of a huge cylinder, caked over, and its outline softened by a thick, scaly, dune-colored incrustation. It had a diameter of about 30 yards. He approached the mass, surprised at the size and more so at the shape, since most meteorites are rounded more or less completely. It was, however, still so hot from its flight through the air as to forbid his near approach. A stirring noise within its cylinder he ascribed to the unequal cooling of its surface, for at that time it had not occurred to him that it might be hollow. He remained standing at the edge of the pit that the thing had made for itself, staring at its strange appearance, astonished chiefly at its unusual shape and color, and dimly perceiving even then some evidence of design in its arrival. I'm going to mute my phone. Yep. I don't know these people. Okay, cool. Do not disturb. There we go. Happy readers now. The early morning was wonderfully still, and the sun, just clearing the pine trees towards Weybridge, was already warm. He did not remember hearing any birds that morning. There was certainly no breeze stirring, and the only sounds were the faint movements from within the cindery cylinder. He was all alone on the common. Then suddenly he noticed with a start that some of the gray clinker, the ashy incrustation that covered the meteorite, was falling off the circular edge of the end. It was dropping off in flakes and raining down upon the sand. A large piece suddenly came off and fell with a sharp noise that brought his heart into his mouth. For a minute he scarcely realized what this meant, and, although the heat was excessive, he clambered down into the pit close to the bulk to see the thing more clearly. He fancied even then that the cooling of the body might account for this, but what disturbed that idea was the fact that the ash was falling only from the end of the cylinder. And then he perceived that, very slowly, the circular top of the cylinder was rotating on its body. It was such a gradual movement that he discovered it only through noticing that a black mark that had been near him 5 minutes ago was now at the other side of the circumference. Even then he scarcely understood what this indicated, until he heard a muffled, grating sound and saw the black mark jerk forward an inch or so. Then the thing came upon him in a flash. The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. "Good heavens," said Ogilvy. "There's a man in it. Men in it. Half roasted to death trying to escape." At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with a flash upon Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal. At that he stood irresolute for a moment, turned, scrambled out of the pit, and set off running wildly into Woking. The time then must have been somewhere about 6 o'clock. He met a wagoner and tried to make him understand, but the tale he told and his appearance were so wild, his hat had fallen into the pit, that the man simply drove on. He was equally unsuccessful with the potman, who was just unlocking the doors of the public house by Horsell Bridge. The fellow thought he was a lunatic at large and made an unsuccessful attempt to shut him into the tap room. That sobered him a little, and when he saw Henderson, the London journalist, in his garden, he called over the palings and made himself understood. "Henderson," he called, "you saw that shooting star last night?" "Well," said Henderson, "it's out on Horsell Common now." "Good Lord," said Henderson, "fallen meteorite, that's good." "But it's something more than a meteorite. It's a cylinder, an artificial cylinder, man, and there's something inside." Henderson stood up with his spade in his hand. "What's that?" he said. He was deaf in one ear. Ogilvy told him all that he had seen. Henderson was a minute or so taking it in. Then he dropped his spade, snatched up his jacket, and came out into the road. The two men hurried back at once to the common, and found the cylinder still lying in the same position. But now the sounds inside had ceased, and a thin circle of bright metal showed between the top and the body of the cylinder. Air was either entering or escaping at the rim with a thin sizzling sound. They listened, rapped on the scaly, burnt metal with the stick, and meeting with no response, they both concluded the man or men inside must be insensible or dead. Of course, the two were quite unable to do anything. They shouted consolation and promises and went off back to the town again to get help. One can imagine them, covered with sand, excited and disordered, running up the little street in the bright sunlight, just as the shop folks were taking down their shutters and people were opening their bedroom windows. Henderson went into the railway station at once in order to telegraph the news to London. The newspaper articles had prepared men's minds for the reception of the idea. By 8 o'clock, a number of boys and unemployed men had already started for the common to see the dead men from Mars. That was the form the story took. I heard of it first from my newspaper boy about 9:15 when I went out to get my daily chronicle. I was naturally startled and lost no time in going out and across the Ottershaw Bridge to the sand pits. I have ads in a few minutes. We're just starting a new chapter here. Decisions. You'll read a little more. Chapter 3, on Horsell Common. I found a little crowd of perhaps 20 people surrounding the huge hole in which the cylinder lay. I have already described the appearance of that colossal bulk embedded in the ground. The turf and gravel about it seemed charred as if by a sudden explosion. No doubt its impact had caused a flash of fire. Henderson and Ogilvy were not there. I think they perceived that nothing was to be done for the present, and had gone away to breakfast at Henderson's house. There were 4 or 5 boys sitting on the edge of the pit, with their feet dangling, and amusing themselves until I stopped them by throwing stones at the giant mass. After I had spoken to them about it, they began playing at touch in and out of the group of bystanders. I guess that's tag. That must be like tag, right? Among these were a couple of cyclists, a jobbing gardener I employed sometimes, a girl carrying a baby, Greg, the butcher, and his little boy, and 2 or 3 loafers and golf caddies who were accustomed to hang about the railway station. Without me yelling. There was very little talking. Few of the common people in England had anything but the vaguest astronomical ideas in those days. Most of them were staring quietly at the big table-like end of the cylinder, which was still as Ogilvy and Henderson had left it. I fancy the popular expectation of a heap of charred corpses was disappointed at this my mouth is failing. I think I'm tired. I fancy the popular expectation of a heap of charred corpses was disappointed at this inanimate bulk. Oh, okay, the corpses were disappointed, okay. Some went away while I was there, and other people came. I clambered into the pit and fancied I heard a faint movement under my feet. The top had certainly ceased to rotate. Yeah, we're going to take a break, It's ad time pretty soon here. And I'm gonna stand up, walk around, maybe turn my air back on. I think it's a good idea. Continue after that. Turn my air on now. Why wait? Still gotta get up early tomorrow. That's fine. You think maybe I should turn off Twitch's notifications? Have the progress bar pop up in my own stream. Yes, I must take you to work. No, staying up late tonight. No? Question mark? Okay, well, it's fine. Starting soon. That's what it says. Excitement. See, I'm still reading, even if it's not the book. Oh, that's nice. This little corner it just really heats up. Should be going soon. We'll be back after the ads. Thank you. Well, it seems like the OBS mute button needs a patch or something. It's doing the same. It won't toggle unmute. This is extraordinarily aggravating. Great, extraordinarily. You're supposed to toggle. Just mute. You're supposed to toggle. Oh, now it's push to talk. That works fine. And now it's push to mute. This is not what I want. That's... Yeah, you can hear me. It's doing like there's just two modes for the function, right? In Streamer Deck. There's three modes, sorry. Just toggle and mute, push to talk and push to mute. Right? Which is great. It's fantastic. It's like throw it out. No, it's just expensive. Super expensive. System make. I don't know. I'll reboot before I worry about it. I have no idea why that did that. There have been no patches. There have been no updates. There has been nothing. Alright, anyways. We will continue now. Right. Top has certainly ceased to rotate. Alright. It was only when I got thus close to it that the strangeness of this object was at all evident to me. At the first glance, it was really no more exciting than an overturned carriage or a tree blown across the road. Not so much so, indeed. Oh, that's a very short sentence. It looked like a rusty gas float. It required a certain amount of scientific education to perceive that the gray scale of the thing was no common oxide, that the yellowish white metal that gleamed in the crack between the lid and the cylinder had an unfamiliar hue. Extraterrestrial had no meaning for most of the onlookers. At that time, it was quite clear in my own mind that the thing had come from the planet Mars, but I judged it improbable that it contained any living creature. I thought the unscrewing might be automatic. In spite of Ogilvy, I still believed that there were men in Mars. My mind ran fancifully on the possibilities of its containing manuscript, on the difficulties in translation that might arise, whether we should find coins and models in it, and so forth. Yet it was a little too large for assurance on this idea. I felt an impatience to see it opened. About 11, as nothing seemed happening, I walked back, full of such thought, to my house in Maybury. But I found it difficult to get to work upon my abstract investigations. In the afternoon, the appearance of the common had altered very much. The early editions of the evening papers had startled London with enormous headlines. A message received from Mars, remarkable story from Woking, and so forth. In addition, Ogilvy's wire to the Astronomical Exchange had roused every observatory in the three kingdoms. There were half a dozen flies or more from Woking station that... Really? Flies? There were half a dozen flies or more from the Woking station standing in the road by the sandpits. A basket chase from Shobham and a rather lordly carriage. Besides that, there was quite a heap of bicycles. In addition, a large number of people must have walked, in spite of the heat of the day, from Woking to Chertsey, so that there was altogether quite a considerable crowd, one or two gaily dressed ladies among the others. Yes, it's an event. Gotta get dressed up. It was glaringly hot, not a cloud in the sky nor a breath of wind, and the only shadow was that of the few scattered pine trees. The burning heather had been extinguished, but the level ground towards Uttershaw was blackened as far as one could see, and still giving off vertical streamers of smoke. An enterprising sweet-stuff dealer in the Chobham Road had set up his son with a barrow-load of green apples and ginger beer. Green apples, blech, I pay you to take them away. Going to the edge of the pit, I found it occupied by a group of about half a dozen men. Henderson, Ogilvy, and a tall, fair-haired man that I afterwards learned was Stent, the astronomer royal, with several workmen wielding spades and pickaxes. Stent was giving directions in a clear, high-pitched voice. He was standing on the cylinder, which was now evidently much cooler. His face was crimson and streaming with perspiration, and something seemed to have irritated him. A large portion of the cylinder had been uncovered, though its lower end was still embedded. As soon as Ogilvy saw me among the staring crowd on the edge of the pit, he called to me to come down, and asked me if I would mind going over to see Lord Hilton, the lord of the manor. The growing crowd, he said, was becoming a serious impediment to their excavations, especially the boys. They wanted a light railing put up, and helped to keep the people back. He told me that a faint stirring was occasionally still audible within the case, but that the workmen had failed to unscrew the top, as it afforded no grip to them. The case appeared to be enormously thick, and it was possible that the faint sounds we heard represented a noisy tumult in the interior. I was very glad to do as he asked, and so become one of the privileged spectators within the contemplated enclosure. I failed to find Lord Hilton at his house, but I was told he was expected from London by the 6 o'clock train from Waterloo. And as it was then about 5:15, I went home, had some tea, and walked up to the station to waylay him. Nope. I got the wrong screen on my thing. Here we go. Hopefully the chapter markers are working. Chapter 4. The cylinder opens. When I returned to the common, the sun was setting. Scattered groups were hurrying from the direction of Woking, and one or two persons were returning. The crowd about the pit had increased, and stood out black against the lemon yellow of the sky. A couple of 100 people, perhaps. There were raised voices, and some sort of struggle appeared to be going on about the pit. Strange imaginings passed through my mind. As I drew nearer, I heard Stent's voice. "Keep back, keep back." A boy came running towards me. "It's a-movin'," he said to me as he passed. "A screwin' and a screwin' out. I don't like it. I'm a-goin' home, I am." There we go, there's the weird language. I went on to the crowd. There were really, I should think, 200 or 300 people elbowing and jostling one another. The one or two ladies there being by no means the least active. "He's fallen in the pit," cried someone. "Keep back," said several. The crowd swayed a little, I elbowed my way through. Everyone seemed greatly excited. I heard a peculiar humming sound from the pit. "I say," said Ogilvy, "help keep these idiots back. We don't know what's in the confounded thing, you know." I saw a young man, a shop assistant in Woking, I believe he was, standing on the cylinder and trying to scramble out of the hole again. The crowd had pushed him in. The end of the cylinder was being screwed out from within. Nearly 2 feet of shining screw projected. Somebody blundered against me, and I narrowly missed being pitched into the top of the screw. I turned, and as I did so, the screw must have come out, for the lid of the cylinder fell upon the gravel with a ringing concussion. I struck my elbow into the person behind me and turned my head towards the thing again. For a moment, that circular cavity seemed perfectly black. I had the sunset in my eyes. I think everyone expected to see a man emerge. Possibly something a little unlike us terrestrial men, but in all essentials a man. I know I did, but looking, I presently saw something stirring within the shadow, a grayish, billowy movements, one above another, and then 2 luminous discs like eyes. Then something resembling a little gray snake, about the thickness of a walking stick, coiled up out of the writhing middle and wriggled in the air towards me. And then another. A sudden chill came over me. There was a loud shriek from a woman behind. I half turned, keeping my eyes fixed upon the cylinder still, from which other tentacles were now projecting, and began pushing my way back from the edge of the pit. I saw astonishment giving place to horror on the faces of the people about me. I heard inarticulate exclamations on all sides. There was a general movement backwards. I saw the shopman struggling still on the edge of the pit. I found myself alone, and saw the people on the other side of the pit running off, Stent among them. I looked again at the cylinder, and ungovernable terror gripped me. I stood petrified and staring. A big, grayish round bulk, the size, perhaps, of a bear, was rising slowly and painfully out of the cylinder. As it bulged up and caught the light, it glistened like wet leather. 2 large, dark-colored eyes were regarding me steadfastly. The mass that framed them, the head of the thing, was rounded and had, one might say, a face. There was a mouth under the eyes, the lipless brim of which quivered and panted and dropped saliva. The whole creature heaved and pulsated convulsively. A lank tentacular appendage gripped the edge of the cylinder, another swayed in the air. Those who have never seen a living Martian can scarcely imagine the strange horror of its appearance. The peculiar V-shaped mouth with its pointed upper lip, the absence of brow ridges, the absence of a chin beneath the wedge-like lower lip, the incessant quivering of this mouth, the gorgon groups of tentacles, the tumultuous breathing of the lungs in a strange atmosphere, the evident heaviness and painfulness of movement due to the greater gravitational energy of the earth. Above all, the extraordinary intensity of the immense eyes were at once vital, intense, inhuman, crippled, and monstrous. There was something fungoid in the oily brown skin, something in the clumsy deliberation of the tedious movements unspeakably nasty. Even at this first encounter, this first glimpse, I was overcome with disgust and dread. Suddenly the monster vanished. It had toppled over the brim of the cylinder and fallen into the pit, with a thud like the fall of a great mass of leather. I heard it give a peculiar thick cry, and forthwith another of these creatures appeared darkly in the deep shadow of the aperture. I turned and, running madly, made for the first group of trees, perhaps 100 yards away, but I ran slantingly and stumbling, for I could not avert my face from these things. That's right, keep your eye on the danger. There, among some young pine trees and furze bushes, I stopped, panting and waiting further developments. The common round the sand pits was dotted with people, standing like myself in a half-fascinated terror, staring at these creatures, or rather at the heaped gravel at the edge of the pit in which they lay, and then, with a renewed horror, I saw a round, black object bobbing up and down on the edge of the pit. It was the head of the shopman who had fallen in, but showing as a little black object against the hot western sun. Now he got his shoulder and knee up, and again he seemed to slip back until only his head was visible. Suddenly he vanished, and I could have fancied a faint shriek had reached me. I had a momentary impulse to go back and help him that my fears overruled. Everything was then quite invisible, hidden by the deep pit in the heap of sand that had the fall of the cylinder had made. That did not come out. Everything was then quite invisible, hidden by the deep pit and the heap of sand that the fall of the cylinder had made. Anyone coming along the road from Choban or Woking would have been amazed at the sight. A dwindling multitude of perhaps 100 people or more standing in a great irregular circle, in ditches, behind bushes, behind gates and hedges, saying little to one another in that short, excited shouts, and staring hard at a few heaps of sand. The barrow of ginger beer stood, a queer derelict, black against the burning sky, and in the sand pits was a row of deserted vehicles, with their horses feeding out of nosebags or pawing the ground. Chapter 5. The Heat Ray. After the glimpse I had had of the Martians emerging from the cylinder in which they had come to the Earth from their planet, a kind of fascination paralyzed my actions. I remained standing knee-deep in the heather, staring at the mound that hid them. I was a battleground of fear and curiosity. I did not dare to go back towards the pit, but I felt a passionate longing to peer into it. I began walking, therefore, in a big curve, seeking some point of vantage and continually looking at the sand heaps that hid these newcomers to our Earth. Once a leash of thin black whips, like the arms of an octopus, flashed across the sunset and was immediately withdrawn, and afterwards a thin rod rose up, joint by joint, bearing at its apex a circular disc that spun with a wobbling motion. What could be going on there? Most of the spectators had gathered in one or two groups. One a little crowd towards Woking, and the other a knot of people in the direction of Chobham. Evidently, they shared my mental conflict. There were a few near me. One man I approached. He was, I perceived, a neighbor of mine, though I did not know his name, and accosted, but it was scarcely a time for articulate conversation. "What ugly brutes," he said. "Good God, what ugly brutes." He repeated this over and over. "Did you see a man in the pit?" I said, but he made no answer to that. We became silent and stood watching for a time, side by side, deriving, I fancy, a certain comfort in one another's company. Then I shifted my position to a little knoll that gave me the advantage of a yard or more of elevation, and when I looked for him presently, he was walking towards Woking. The sunset faded to twilight before anything further happened. The crowd far away on the left towards Woking seemed to grow, and I heard now a faint murmur from it. The little knot of people towards Chobham dispersed. There was scarcely an intimidation of movement. There was scarcely an intimidation of movement from the pit. Sure, we'll say that's sensible. It was this, as much as anything, that gave people courage, and I suppose the new arrivals from Woking also helped to restore confidence. At any rate, as the dusk came on, a slow, intermittent movement from the sandpits began, a movement that seemed to gather force as the stillness of the evening about the cylinder remained unbroken. Vertical black figures in twos and threes would advance, stop, watch, and advance again, spreading out as they did so in a thin, irregular crescent that promised to enclose the pit in its attenuated horns. I, too, on my side, began to move towards the pit. Then I saw some cabmen, and others had walked boldly into the sandpits, and heard the clatter of hooves and the grit of wheels. I saw a lad trundling off the bundle of the barrel. He took the apples. And then, within 30 yards of the pit, advancing from the direction of Horsell, I noted a little black knot of men, the foremost of whom was waving a white flag. He's surrendering. This was the deputation. There had been a hasty consultation, and since the Martians were evidently, in spite of their repulsive forms, intelligent creatures, it had been resolved to show them by approaching them with signals that we too were intelligent. Flutter, flutter went the flag, first to the right, then to the left. Filler much? It was too far for me to recognize anyone there, but afterwards I learned that Ogilvy, Stent, and Henderson were with others in this attempt at communication. This little group had, in its advance, dragged inward, so to speak, the circumference of the now almost complete circle of people, and a number of dim black figures followed it, at discreet distances. Suddenly there was a flash of light, and a quantity of luminous greenish smoke came out of the pit in 3 distinct puffs, which drove up, one after the other, straight into the still air. This smoke, or flame perhaps would be a better word for it, was so bright that the deep blue sky overhead and the hazy stretches of brown common towards Chertsey, set with black pine trees, seemed to darken abruptly as these puffs arose, and to remain the darker after their dispersal. At the same time, a faint hissing sound became audible. Beyond the pit stood the little wedge of people, with the white flag at its apex, arrested by these phenomena, the little knot of small vertical black shapes upon the black ground, as the green... Sorry. And that was the end of the sentence. As the green smoke arose, their faces flashed out pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Slowly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out from it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire. Then, by the light of their own destruction, I saw them staggering and falling, and their supporters turning to run. I stood staring, not as yet realizing that this was death leaping from man to man in that little distant crowd. All I felt was that it was something very strange. An almost noiseless and blinding flash of light, and a man fell headlong and lay still. As the unseen shaft of heat passed over them, pine trees burst into fire, and every dry furze bush became with one dull thud a mass of flames. And far away towards Knapp Hill, I saw the flashes of trees and hedges and wooden buildings suddenly set alight. It was sweeping round swiftly and steadily, this flaming death, this invisible, inevitable sword of heat. I perceived it coming towards me by the flashing bushes it touched, and was too astounded and stupefied to stir. I heard the crackle of fire in the sandpits and the sudden squeal of a horse that was as suddenly stilled. Then it was as if an invisible yet intensely heated finger were drawn through the heather between me and the Martians, and all along a curving line beyond the sandpits and dark ground smoked and crackled. Something fell with a crash far away to the left where the road from Woking Station opens out on the common. Forthwith the hissing and humming ceased, and the black, dome-like object sank slowly out of sight into the pit. I didn't want visitors. All this happened with such swiftness that I had stood motionless, dumbfounded and dazzled by the flashes of light. Had that death swept through a full circle, it must inevitably have slain me in my surprise. But it passed and spared me, and left the night about me suddenly dark and unfamiliar. The undulating common seemed now dark almost to blackness, except where its roadways lay gray and pale under the deep blue sky of the early night. It was dark and suddenly void of men. Overhead the stars were mustering, and in the west the sky was still a pale, bright, almost greenish blue. The tops of the pine trees and the roofs of Horsell came out sharp and black against the western afterglow. The Martians and their appliances were altogether invisible, save for that thin mast upon which their restless mirror wobbled. Patches of bush and isolated trees here and there smoked and glowed still, and the houses towards Woking Station were sending up spires of flame into the stillness of the evening air. Nothing was changed, save for that a terrible astonishment. The little group of black specks with the flag of white had been swept out of existence, and the stillness of the evening, so it seemed to me, had scarcely been broken. It came to me that I was upon this dark common, helpless, unprotected, and alone. Suddenly, like a thing falling upon me from without, came fear. With an effort, I turned and began a stumbling run through the heather. The fear I felt was no rational fear, but a panicked terror, not only of the Martians, but of the dusk and stillness all about me. Such an extraordinary effect in unmanning me it had that I ran weeping silently as a child might do. Once I had turned, I did not dare to look back. I remember I felt an extraordinary persuasion that I was being played with, that presently, when I was upon the very verge of safety, this mysterious death, as swift as the passage of light, would leap after me from the pit about the cylinder and strike me down. These chapters are quite short. Chapter 6, The Heat Ray in the Chobham Road. It is still a matter... Hang on, I'm going to do the throat spray thing again. Should have done the drink ads. It is still a matter of wonder how the Martians are able to slay men so swiftly and so silently. Many think that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose, by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the parabolic mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. So close. But no one has absolutely proved these details. However it is done, it is certain that a beam of heat is the essence of the matter. Heat and invisible instead of visible light. What is combustible flashes into flame as it's touched. As it's touched, lead runs like water. It softens iron, cracks and melts glass, and when it falls upon water incontinently, that explodes into steam. That night, nearly 40 people lay under the starlight about the pit, charred and distorted beyond recognition, and all night long the common from Horsell to Maybury was deserted and brightly ablaze. The news of the massacre probably reached Chobham, Woking, and Ottershaw about the same time. In Woking, the shops had closed when the tragedy happened, and a number of people, shop people and so forth, attracted by the stories they had heard, were walking over the Horsell Bridge and along the road between the hedges that runs out at last upon the common. You may imagine the young people brushed up after the labors of the day and making this novelty, as they would make any novelty, the excuse for walking together and enjoying trivial flirtation. You may figure to yourself the hum of voices along the road in the gloaming. As yet, of course, few people in Woking even knew that the cylinder had opened. though poor Henderson had sent a messenger on a bicycle to the post office with a special wire to an evening paper. Yeah, what a great date idea. Insert joke about fever or hot flashes here. Yes. Or, a better joke. Yeah, yeah. Evening paper, yeah. As these folks came out by twos and threes upon the open, they found little knots of people talking excitedly and peering at the spinning mirror over the sandpits. And the newcomers were, no doubt, soon infected by the excitement of the occasion. By 8:30, when the deputation was destroyed, there may have been a crowd of 300 people or more at this place, besides those who had left the road to approach the Martians nearer. There were 3 policemen, too, one of whom was mounted, doing their best, under instructions from Stent, to keep the people back and deter them from approaching the cylinder. There was some booing from those more thoughtless and excitable souls to whom a crowd is always an occasion for noise and horseplay. Stent and Ogilvy, anticipating some possibilities of a collision, had telegraphed from Horsell to the barracks as soon as the Martians emerged, for the help of a company of soldiers to protect these strange creatures from violence. Yeah, okay. After that, they returned to lead that ill-fated advance. The description of their death, as it was seen by the crowd, tallies very closely with my own impressions. The 3 puffs of green smoke, the deep humming note, and the flashes of flame. But that crowd of people had a far narrower escape than mine. Only the fact that a hummock of heathery sand intercepted the lower part of the heat ray saved them. Had the elevation of the parabolic mirror been even a few yards higher, none could have lived to tell the tale. They saw the flashes and the men falling, and an invisible hand, as it were, lit the bushes as it hurried towards them through the twilight. Then, with a whistling note that rose above the droning of the pit, the beam swung close over their heads, lighting the tops of the beech trees that lined the roads, and splitting the bricks, smashing the windows, firing the window frames, and bringing down in crumbling ruin a portion of the gable of the house nearest that corner. In the sudden thud, hiss, and glare of the igniting trees, the panic-stricken crowd seems to have swayed hesitatingly for some moments. Sparks and burning twigs began to fall into the road, and single leaves like puffs of flame. Hats and dresses caught fire. Then came a crying from the common. There were shrieks and shouts, and suddenly a mounted policeman came galloping through the confusion, with his hands clasped over his head, screaming. "They're coming!" a woman shrieked, and incontinently everyone was turning and pushing at those behind in order to clear their way to Woking again. They must have bolted as blindly as a flock of sheep. Where the road grows narrow and black between the high banks, the crowd jammed, and a desperate struggle occurred. All that crowd did not escape. Three persons at least, 2 women and a little boy, were crushed and trampled there, and left to die amid the terror and the darkness. Really hoping these chapter marks are working, all things considered. Chapter 7. How I Reached Home. For my own part, I remember nothing of my flight, except the stress of blundering against trees and stumbling through the heather. All about me gathered the invisible terrors of the Martians. That pitiless sword of heat seemed whirling to and fro, flourishing overhead before it descended and smote me out of life. I came into the road between the crossroads and Horsell, and ran along this to the crossroads. Between crossroads and Horsell, and then ran towards crossroads. At last, I could go no further. I was exhausted with the violence of my emotion and of my flight, and I staggered and fell by the wayside. That was near the bridge that crosses the canal by the gasworks. I fell and lay still. It must have remained there some time. I sat up, strangely perplexed. For a moment, perhaps, I could not clearly understand how I came there. My terror had fallen from me like a garment. My hat had gone, and my collar had burst away from its fastener. A few minutes before, there had only been 3 real things before me: the immensity of the night and space and nature, my own feebleness and anguish, and the near approach of death. Now it was as if something turned over, and the point of view altered abruptly. There was no sensible transition from one state of mind to the other. I was immediately the self of every day again. A decent, ordinary citizen. The silent commotion, the impulse of my flight, the starting flames were as if they had been in a dream. I asked myself, had these latter things indeed happened? I could not credit it. I rose and walked unsteadily up the steep incline to the bridge. My mind was blank wonder. My muscles and nerves seemed drained of their strength. I dare say I staggered drunkenly. A head rose over the arch, and the figure of a workman carrying a basket appeared. Beside him ran a little boy. He passed me, wishing me good night. I was minded to speak to him, but did not. I answered his greeting with a meaningless mumble and went on over the bridge. Over the Maybury Arch, a train, a billowing tumult of white, firelit smoke, and a long caterpillar of lighted windows, went flying south, clatter, clatter, clap, rap, and it had gone. A dim group of people talked in the gate of one of the houses in the pretty little row of gables that was called Oriental Terrace. It was all so real and so familiar. And that behind me, it was frantic, fantastic. Such things, I told myself, could not be. Perhaps I am a man of exceptional moods. I do not know how far my experience is common. At times, I suffer from the strangest sense of detachment from myself and the world about me. I seem to watch it all from the outside, from somewhere inconceivably remote, out of time, out of space, out of the stress and tragedy of it all. This feeling was very strong upon me that night. Here was another side to my dream. But the trouble was the blank incongruity of this serenity and the swift death flying yonder not 2 miles away. There was a noise of business from the gasworks, and the electric lamps were all alight. I stopped at the group of people. "What news from the common?" said I. There were 2 men and a woman at the gate. "Eh?" said one of the men, turning. "What news from the common?" I said. "Ain't yer just been there?" asked the man. Apparently both of them at the same time. "People seem fairly silly about the common," said the woman over the gate. "What's it all about?" And yes, she said abart. "Haven't you heard of the men from Mars?" said I. "The creatures from Mars." "Quite enough," said the woman over the gate. "Thanks." And all 3 of them laughed. I felt foolish and angry. I tried and found I could not tell them what I had seen. They laughed again at my broken sentences. "You'll hear more yet," I said, and went on to my home. I startled my wife at the doorway, so haggard was I. I went into the dining room, sat down, drank some wine, and so soon as I could collect myself sufficiently, I told her the things I had seen. The dinner, which was a cold one, had already been served, and remained neglected on the table while I told my story. "There is one thing," I said, to allay the fears I had aroused. "They are the most sluggish things I ever saw crawl. They may keep the pit and kill people who come near them, but they cannot get out of it. But the horror of them—" "Don't, dear," said my wife, knitting her brows and putting her hand on mine. "Poor Ogilvy," I said. "To think he may be lying dead there." My wife, at least, did not find my experience incredible. When I saw how deadly white her face was, I ceased abruptly. "They may come here," she said, again and again. I pressed her to take wine and tried to reassure her. "We should do that, Valena. We should keep wine around just in case literally anything goes wrong. That seems to be the ultimate cure-all for everything in all these books. A bit of brandy, some wine, you know." I say that knowing we actually keep some pretty good alcohol around. After that interruption, "Yes," she said, "they may come here." "They can scarcely move," I said. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. "We don't have brandy, though. I know we have rum and whiskey and scotch. I think a few other things. I think we have brandy. But wine is a little, it really depends, right? When we go out to one of those nice restaurants, sometimes a nice fruity red wine is really nice, especially with a steak, right? Good old red meat. But, yeah. I'm not sure about keeping it around the house. It doesn't, you have we have a bottle of whiskey, right? You drink like an ounce, right, per serving, right? And so that sticks around forever in a tiny little bottle. Wine, we used to have wine, and back in Australia, when I lived in Australia, right, Dad joined a wine club. Every 6 months we got like 12 bottles of wine, and we stored them in our cellar. We had a cellar, it's under the house storage, and it just built up and built up. We never went and drank it. All you had to do was drink 2 bottles a month. It's not even excessive, but it just built up and built up and built up. Yeah, it's tangent time, sorry. Yeah. So I don't know. In my experience, wine just builds up. I don't drink it as much as I should, Brett. I say should. Maybe we should try some. Maybe things are different. Maybe we shouldn't do 2 bottles a month, though. All right. Back to the story. Sorry for those who were listening to the story and didn't expect to hear about my history with wine. Began to comfort her and myself by repeating all that Ogilvy had told me of the impossibility of the Martians establishing themselves on the Earth. In particular, I laid stress on the gravitational difficulty. On the surface of the Earth, the force of gravity is 3 times what it is on the surface of Mars. A Martian, therefore, would weigh 3 times more than on Mars, albeit his muscular strength would be the same. His own body would be a cope of lead to him. Therefore was part of the previous sentence. That indeed was the general opinion. Both the Times and the Daily Telegraph, for instance, insisted on it the next morning, and both overlooked, just as I did, 2 obvious modifying influences. Before I continue, I'm gonna make my guess. They probably knew that coming to Earth and probably planned for it somehow. The atmosphere of the Earth, we now know, contains far more oxygen or far less argon, whichever way one likes to put it, than does Mars. The invigorating influence of this excess of oxygen upon the Martians indisputably did much to counterbalance the increased weight of their bodies. Nope. And in the second place, we all overlook the fact that such mechanical intelligence as the Martian possessed was quite able to dispense with muscular exertion at a pinch. That's kind of my idea, yeah. Also, I've seen the cover of the book. But I did not consider these points at the time, and so my reasoning was dead against the chances of the invaders. With wine and food, the confidence of my own table, and the necessity of reassuring my wife, I grew by insensible degrees courageous and secure. Also, you're kind of desperate for comfort at this point, right? Just saw dozens of people die in front of you in a blink of an eye. "We have done a foolish thing," said I, fingering my wine glass. "They are dangerous because, no doubt, they are mad with terror. Perhaps they expected to find no living things, certainly no intelligent living things. A shell in the pit, said I. If the worst comes to worst, we'll kill them all. The intense excitement of the events had no doubt left my perceptive powers in a state of erethism. Eretherism, I suppose. I remember that dinner table with extraordinary vividness even now. My dear wife's sweet, anxious face peering at me from under the pink lampshade, the white cloth with its silver and glass table furniture. For in those days, even philosophical writers had many little luxuries. The crimson purple wine in my glass are photographically distinct. And at the end of it I sat, tempering nuts with a cigarette. Really? Gross. Regretting Ogilvy's rashness and denouncing the short-sighted timidity of the Martians. So some respectable dodo in the Mauritius might have lorded it in his nest, and discussed the arrival of that shipful of pitiless sailors in want of animal food. We will peck them to death tomorrow, my dear. I did not know it, but that was the last civilized dinner I was to eat for very many strange and terrible days. So, it was chapter 7, right? Yes, chapter 7. We're on chapter 8, Friday night. The most extraordinary thing to my mind of all the strange and wonderful things that happened upon that Friday was the dovetailing of the commonplace habits of our social order with the first beginnings of the series of events that was to topple that social order headlong. If on Friday night you had taken a pair of compasses and drawn a circle with a radius of 5 miles round the Woking sandpits, I doubt if you would have had one human being outside it, unless it were some relation of Stent, or of the 3 or 4 cyclists or London people laying dead on the common, whose emotions or habits were at all affected by the newcomers. Many people had heard of the cylinder, of course, and talked about it in their leisure, but it certainly did not make the sensation that an ultimatum to Germany would have done. In London that night, poor Henderson's telegram describing the gradual unscrewing of the shot was judged to be a canard, and his evening paper, after wiring for authentication from him and receiving no reply, the man was killed, decided not to print a special edition. Socks got to be pulled up. Even within the 5-mile circle, the great majority of people were inert. I have already described the behavior of the men and women to whom I spoke. All over the district, people were dining and supping. Working men were gardening after the labors of the day. Children were being put to bed. Young people were wandering through the lanes, love-making. Students sat over their books. Maybe there was a murmur in the village streets, a novel and dominant topic in the public houses, and here and there a messenger, or even an eyewitness of the latter occurrences, caused a whirl of excitement, a shouting and a running to and fro. But for the most part, the daily routine of working, eating, drinking, sleeping went on as it had done for countless years, as though no planet Mars existed in the sky. Even at Woking Station and Horsell and Chobham, that was the case. In Woking Junction, until a late hour, trains were stopping and going on. Others were shunting on the sidings, passengers were alighting and waiting, and everything was proceeding in the most ordinary way. A boy from the town, trenching on Smith's Monopoly, was selling papers with the afternoon's news. A ringing impact of trucks, the sharp whistle of the engines from the junction, excuse me, mingled with their shouts of men from Mars. Excited men came into the station about 9 o'clock with incredible tidings, and caused no more disturbance than drunkards might have done. People rattling Londonwards peered into the darkness outside the carriage windows and saw only a rare, flickering, vanishing spark dance up from the direction of Horsell. A red glow and a thin veil of smoke driving across the stars, and thought that nothing more serious than a heath fire was happening. It was only round the edge of the common that any disturbance was perceptible. There were half a dozen villas burning on the Woking border. There were lights in all the houses on the common side of the three villages, and the people there kept awake till dawn. A curious crowd lingered restlessly, people coming and going, but the crowd remaining, both on the Chobham and Horsell bridges. One or two adventurous souls, it was afterwards found, went into the darkness and crawled quite near the Martians, but they never returned. For now and again, a light ray, like the beam of a warship's searchlight, swept the common, and the heat ray was ready to follow. Save for such, that big area of common was silent and desolate, and the charred bodies lay about on it all night under the stars, and all the next day. A noise of hammering from the pit was heard by many people. So you have the state of things on Friday night. In the center, sticking into the skin of our old planet Earth like a poisoned dart, was this cylinder. But the poison was scarcely working yet. Around it was a patch of silent common smoldering in places, and with a few dark, dimly seen objects laying in contorted attitudes here and there. Here and there was a burning bush or tree. Beyond was a fringe of excitement, and farther than that fringe the inflammation had not crept as yet. In the rest of the world, the stream of life still flowed as it had flowed for immemorial years. The fever of the war that would presently clog vein and artery, deaden nerve and destroy brain, had still to develop. All night long, the Martians were hammering and stirring, sleepless, indefatigable, at work upon the machines they were making ready, and ever and again a puff of greenish-white smoke whirled up to the starlit sky. About 11, a company of soldiers came through Horsell, and deployed along the edge of the common to form a cordon. Later, a second company marched through Chobham to deploy on the north side of the common. Several officers from the Inkerman barracks had been on the common earlier in the day, and one, Major Eden, was reported to be missing. The colonel of the regiment came to the Chobham bridge and was busy questioning the crowd at midnight. The military authorities were certainly alive to the seriousness of the business. About 11, the next morning's papers were able to say a squadron of hussars, 2 Maxims, and about 400 men of the Cardigan regiment started from Aldershot. A few seconds after midnight, the crowd in the Chertsey Road, Woking, saw a star fall from the heaven into the pine woods to the northwest. It had a greenish color, and caused a silent brightness like summer lightning. This was the second cylinder. Yes, I believe there should be 8 more to go after this. I think we should do, one more chapter. We have ads coming up in a few minutes. So we're going to take a break here. Read a chapter and then call it. It is a little shorter than usual. I am feeling a little under the weather. Thank you, vaccines. But I think that's what we're going to do. I'm really annoyed that this button is no longer toggling the mute. Maybe I need to restart all the things. Probably. These chapters are going by quite quickly, but It's still quite a long story. We're on, like, so I say, chapter 9. There's the next one. Yeah, 1 minute for the ads to go. Chapter 9. How far down does the story go? There's an epilogue, right? Oh, wow. Yeah, we might have 4 to 6 nights of reading this one, so that's all right. Right, we'll be back after the ads. And the ads are over. And once again, had to manually unmute the mic. Bizarre and strange. I don't know. I don't even know it so much. Right, one more chapter. Chapter 9. The fighting begins. Saturday lives in my memory as a day of suspense. It was a day of lassitude too, hot and close, with, I am told, a rapidly fluctuating barometer. I had slept but little, though my wife had succeeded in sleeping, and I rose early. I went into my garden before breakfast and stood listening, but towards the common there was nothing stirring but a lark. The milkman came as usual. I heard the rattle of his chariot, and I went round to the side gate to ask the latest news. He told me that during the night the Martians had been surrounded by troops, and that guns were expected. Then a familiar, reassuring note. I heard a train running towards Woking. They aren't to be killed, said the milkman, if that can possibly be avoided. I saw my neighbor gardening, chatted with him for a time, and then strolled into breakfast. It was the most unexceptional morning. My neighbor was of opinion that the troops would be able to capture or to destroy the Martians during the day. It's a pity they make themselves so unapproachable, he said. It would be curious to know how they live on another planet. We might learn a thing or two. He came up to the fence and extended a handful of strawberries, for his gardening was as generous as it was enthusiastic. At the same time, he told me of the burning of the pine woods about the Byfleet golf links. They say, he said, that there's another of those blessed things fallen there, number 2. But one's enough, surely. This lot'll cost the insurance people a pretty penny before everything's settled. He laughed with an air of the greatest good humor as he said this. The woods, he said, were still burning, and pointed out a haze of smoke to me. They'll be hot underfoot for days, on account of the thick soil of pine needles and turf, he said, then grew serious over poor Ogilvy. After breakfast, instead of working, I decided to walk down towards the common. Under the railway bridge I found a group of soldiers, sappers, I think, men in small round caps, dirty red jackets unbuttoned, and showing their blue shirts, dark trousers, and boots coming to the calf. They told me no one was allowed over the canal, and, looking along the road towards the bridge, I saw one of the cardigan men standing sentinel there. I talked with those soldiers for a time. I told them of my sight of the Martians on the previous evening. None of them had seen the Martians, and they had but the vaguest ideas of them, so that they plied me with questions. They said that they did not know who had authorized the movements of the troops. Their idea was that a dispute had arisen at the House Guards. The ordinary sapper is a great deal better educated than the common soldier, and they discussed the peculiar conditions of the possible fight with some acuteness. I described the heat ray to them, and they began to argue among themselves. Crawl up under cover and rush 'em, rush 'em, say I, said one. Get-a, said another. What's cover against this 'ere 'eat? Sticks to cook yer. What we got to do is to go as near as the ground'll let us, and then drive a trench. Blow your trenches. You always want trenches. You ought to have been born in a rabbit snippy. Ain't they got any next then? Said a third abruptly, a little contemplative dark man smoking a pipe. I repeated my question. I repeated my description. Octopuses, said he. That's what I calls 'em. Talk about fishers of men. Fighters of fish it is this time. It ain't no murder-killing beast like that, said the first speaker. Why not shell the darn things straight off and finish 'em? Said the little dark man. You can't tell what they might do. Where's your shells? Said the first speaker. There ain't no time. Do it in a rush. That's my tip, and do it at once. So they discussed it. After a while I left them, and went on to the railway station to get as many morning papers as I could. But I will not weary the reader with the description of that long morning and of the longer afternoon. I did not succeed in getting a glimpse of the common, for even Horsell and Chobham church towers were in the hands of the military authorities. The soldiers I addressed didn't know anything. The officers were mysterious as well as busy. I found people in the town quite secure again in the presence of the military, and I heard for the first time from Marshall, the tobacconist, and his son was among the dead of the common. On the common, the soldiers had made the people on the outskirts of Horsell lock up, and leave their houses. I got back to lunch about 2, very tired, for, as I have said, the day was extremely hot and dull, and in order to refresh myself, I took a cold bath in the afternoon. About 4:30 I went up to the railway station to get an evening paper, for the morning papers had contained only a very inaccurate description of the killing of Stent, Henderson, Ogilvy, and the others. But there was little I didn't know. The Martians did not show an inch of themselves. They seemed busy in their pit, and there was a sound of hammering and an almost continuous streamer of smoke. Apparently they were busy getting ready for a struggle. Fresh attempts have been made to signal, but without success, was the stereotyped formula of the papers. A sapper told me it was done by a man in a ditch with a flag on a long pole. The Martians took as much notice of such advances as we should of the lowing of a cow. I must confess the sight of all this armament, all this preparation, greatly excited me. My imagination became belligerent, and defeated the invaders in a dozen striking ways. Something of my schoolboy dreams of battle and heroism came back. It hardly seemed a fair fight to me at that time. They seemed very helpless in that pit of theirs. About 3 o'clock, there began the thud of a gun at measured intervals from Chertsey or Addlestone. I learned that the smouldering pine wood into which the second cylinder had fallen was being shelled, in the hope of destroying that object before it opened. It was only about 5, however, that a field gun reached Chobham for use against the first body of Martians. About 6 in the evening, as I sat at tea with my wife in the summer house, talking vigorously about the battle that was lowering upon us, I heard a muffled detonation from the common, and immediately after a gust of firing. Close on the heels of that came a violent rattling crash, quite close to us, that shook the ground, and starting out upon the lawn, I saw the tops of the trees about the Oriental College burst into a smoky red flame, and the tower of the little church beside it slid down into ruin. The pinnacle of the mosque had vanished, and the roof line of the college itself looked as if a 100-ton gun had been at work upon it. One of our chimneys cracked, as if a shot had hit it, flew, and a piece of it came clattering down the tiles and made a heap of broken red fragments upon the flower bed by my study window. I and my wife stood amazed. Then I realized that the crest of Mayberry Hill must be within range of the Martians' heat ray, now that the college was cleared out of the way. At that I gripped my wife's arm, and without ceremony ran her out into the road. Then I fetched out the servant, telling her I would go upstairs myself for the box she was clamoring for. "We can't possibly stay here," I said, and as I spoke, the firing reopened for a moment upon the common. "But where are we to go?" said my wife in terror. I thought, perplexed. Then I remembered her cousins at Leatherhead. "Leatherhead!" I shouted above the sudden noise. She looked away from me downhill. The people were coming out of their houses, astonished. "How are we to get to Leatherhead?" she said. Down the hill I saw a bevy of hussars ride under the railway bridge. 3 galloped through the open gates of the Oriental College. 2 others dismounted and began running from house to house. The sun, shining through the smoke that drove up from the tops of the trees, seemed blood-red, and threw an unfamiliar lurid light upon everything. "Stop here," said I. "You are safe here." And I started off at once for the Spotted Dog, for I knew the landlord had a horse and dog cart. I ran, for I perceived that in a moment everyone upon this side of the hill would be moving. I found him in his bar, quite unaware of what was going on behind his house. A man stood with his back to me, talking to him. "I must have a pound," said the landlord, "and I have no one to drive it." "I'll give you 2, said I, over the stranger's shoulder. "What for?" "And I'll bring it back by midnight," I said. "Lord," said the landlord, "what's the hurry? I'm selling my bit of a pig, 2 pounds, and you bring it back. What's going on now?" I explained hastily that I have to leave my home, and so secured the dog cart. At the time, it did not seem to me nearly so urgent that the landlord should leave his. I took care to have the cart there and then, drove it off down the road, and leaving it in charge of my wife and servant, rushed into my house and packed a few valuables, such plate as we had, and so forth. The beech trees below the house were burning while I did this, and the palings up the road glowed red. While I was occupied in this way, one of the dismounted hussars came running up. He was going from house to house, warning people to leave. He was going on as I came out from my front door, lugging my treasures, done up in a tablecloth. I shouted after him, "What news?" He turned, stared, bawled something out, crawling out in a thing like a dish cover, and ran on to the gate of the house ran on to the gate of the house at the crest. A sudden whirl of black smoke driving across the road hid him for a moment. I ran to my neighbor's door and rapped to satisfy myself of what I already knew, that his wife had gone to London with him and had locked up her house. I went in again, according to my promise, to get my servant's box, lugged it out, clapped it beside her on the tail of the dog cart, and then caught the reins and jumped up to the driver's seat beside my wife. In another moment, we were clear of the smoke and noise, and spanking down the opposite slope of Maybury Hill towards Old Woking. Ticklish. In front was a quiet, sunny landscape, a wheat field ahead on either side of the road, and the Maybury Inn with its swinging sign. I saw the doctor's cart ahead of me. At the bottom of the hill, I turned my head to look at the hillside I was leaving. Thick streamers of black smoke shot with threads of red fire were driving up into the still air and throwing dark shadows upon the green treetops eastward. The smoke already extended far away to the east and west. Sorry, there you go. To the Byfleet pine woods eastward, and to Woking on the west. The road was dotted with people running towards us, and very faint now, but very distinct through the hot, quiet air, one heard the whir of a machine gun that was presently stilled, and an intermittent cracking of rifles. Apparently the Martians were setting fire to everything within range of their heat ray. I am not an expert driver, and I had immediately to turn my attention to the horse, when I looked back again, and the second hill had hidden the black smoke. I slashed the horse with the whip and gave him a loose rein until Woking and Send lay between us and that quivering tumult. I overtook and passed the doctor between Woking and Send. We're going to end there, escaping from the first assault on planet Earth. Here, I'm going to say 15-20% through the book already. Chapters are terribly short. This is very true. But I'm tired, I'm yawning, and I'm stumbling over my letters. Yes, fleeing for our lives. Oh, it's getting pretty bad. Very, very bad. Yeah, it's a good time to stop. It's a bit of a shorter stream, but that's fine. I'll go down here. I'm going to clicky click chapter 10. Here we go. That'll give me, just like, give me an anchor? It should give me an anchor. Cool. And then, that's the wrong page. So let's go over here. I'm just going to bookmark this on stream while everyone's here instead of doing it in my own time. But, you know, you could argue this is my own time. Just listen to the music. I do my thing. Project Gutenberg. Is that really? Let's do this. Oof. And then add. Does that make the thing happy? Good enough. Good enough. We reread book 1, chapters 1 to 9. There we go. Oh, right. Let's go. Please do remember, anyone who's watching, the next few weeks, this is like the beginning of November 2025 for those who are watching 50 years in the future, where our friend Melanie Bell will be doing a solo game jam. I have no idea what kind of game she has boiling up in her brain, but hopefully she'll get it all spilled out into code and game design, and then it'll be a big surprise. There we go. And you can't see my face because it's in front of me. I can do this. Just hide it behind chat. That kind of makes a little more sense. Hell, it even makes chat a little more readable. I guess maybe we should keep it here all the time. No AI assets. I mean, that's got everyone I know who isn't a CIO or in charge of a lot of money hates AI. Gen AI specifically, and good on you, as you should. There's nothing good about it. Literally nothing good about it. I won't go into that because I actually want to stop. And so I'm going to do that. Yes. Is there? I don't think I even want to raid. I want to go to sleep. Well, Neff is alive. But then I'll have to talk. I don't want to talk. I see the person streaming. Yeah, no. Thank you for calling. Thank you for listening. Yeah, it is okay to raid and run, but I'm just gonna call it here. I just want to run away. As I was saying, thank you for listening. Before you leave, do please remember to return your reading materials to the shelves and be kind to one another. I just hope the end scene works.